There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean of Sean Breathes Books. Welcome to my 7th annual midlife book freak. Not midlife, Sean. You're showing your age and what you're preoccupied with. Your midlife is almost over. Mid-year book freakout tag 2024. I have done one every year since I came to BookTube in 2018. So here I am. This was originated by IsThatChami? IsThatChami? A booktuber who no longer has a presence on YouTube. And all of my fabulous iterations of this tag are in the show notes. Without further ado, let's get started. Number 1, best book you've read so far. I have a tie. In fact, I have one fiction, one non-fiction. I have read some excellent novels. My reading is, I have read far less by the midpoint this year than in typical years for personal reasons, but I have read a lot of really great novels. The one that stands out as being number 1 is My Friends by Hisham Matar, a 2024 novel by a Libyan-American writer who lives in the UK. Have I got that right? Yes, he was born in New York City. About a Benghazi boy who goes to school in Edinburgh and then gets involved in international politics, especially the repressive terrorism of Muammar Gaddafi, which ends up meaning that he stays in London for the rest of the novel. Into his adulthood and all of the friends, foibles, and deeply moving introspections of a lifetime recovering from that trauma. Just an incredible novel. And the best nonfiction book I've read, I can't stop thinking about it. You can see how well tabbed it is this memoir, Committed, on Meaning and Madwomen by Suzanne Scanlon. I have a full review of this, which I will link in the show notes. This is Suzanne Scanlon's memoir of, in her young adulthood, in her university days, being institutionalized in a psychiatric institution for about 3 years, and how she has spent the rest of her life not only recovering from that, but exploring it, making meaning of it as a reader and as a writer. And I'm not doing it justice in just a couple sentences. I think I do a better job in my full review, but it is one of the most incredible memoirs I have ever read. It's one of my favorite books. Period. Number 2, best sequel you've read so far. I don't usually read sequels, but in fact, this year I have read both Volume 1 and Volume 2 of a series. And the series is called The Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon by Beth Brower. This is Volume 1, and which I read earlier this year, and I liked it, but it felt it didn't have a sense of completeness, which I thought, even though it's part of a series, it should have. But some of my subscribers disabused me of that notion, said, you just got to keep reading. Just keep reading. So I did keep reading, and I went to Volume 2 and loved it. There are, 10 volumes. I'm not sure that the writer has decided how many volumes ultimately there will be, but this is Volume 2, and there I think are at least 10. And this is a story set in 1883. Emma M. Lyon is a impoverished heir to an estate, but has to live with some relatives or relatives-in-law that she can't stand, who thwart her every move and keep her impoverished. And it's very, very funny. And I cannot believe that the author, Beth Brower, is not British. She's obviously done a lot of research. Maybe she is British and she just lives in America. I don't know a whole lot about her. This is not only the best sequel I've read in 2024 so far, it's the only one, but it was really a step up compared to Volume 1, and so now I am definitely going to keep reading the series. The next one is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. I've got 2 here. One is Rónán Hession's 3rd novel, Ghost Mountain. This is an art which he sent me with some very nice inscription, and it came out at the end of May. Looking forward to getting to it before the year's end for sure. It's getting rave reviews. All of his novels have, but most of the reviews I have had a peek at say he's broken new ground and reached a new level as a novelist. So that has piqued my curiosity. The other one is a debut by a gay African novelist, Blessings by I can't remember. I had it.
very special Fane online event to celebrate the launch of Blessings, the debut novel by rising literary star Chukwuebuka Ibeh.
Okay, I've looked it up again. It's by Chukwuebuka Ibeh, and it just came out a couple months ago. It came out very recently in Canada. I had already ordered the UK copy by that time, and I actually will be starting this very soon. Stay tuned for my very next video. The author is from Port Harcourt, Nigeria. And I don't know what the story is about. I don't want to know anything about the story, but it is a gay novel. What else would I need to know? Oh, and the author's really hot. Number 4, most anticipated release for the second half of the year. And again, I've got 2. One is Sally Rooney's fourth novel, Intermezzo, comes out September 24th. And I'm a huge Sally Rooney fan. And another one of my favorite writers, Louise Erdrich, has a new novel coming out September 30th called The Mighty Red. Don't know anything about those novels, don't need to know anything about those novels, but that's my answer to this question. Biggest disappointment, again, tie. You might as well just expect that I have 2 books for almost every answer. The last 2 novels I read by Edna O'Brien, my friend and book 2 buddy reader, Sonia, of An Enthusiastic Reader, and I had embarked upon a chronologically completist project of reading every novel by the wonderful Irish writer Edna O'Brien. The last 2 we read were Night, which we didn't like, and Johnny, We Hardly Knew You. I think it has a different title in maybe America. Similar, but not quite the same title in America. And it was so bad we couldn't finish it, so we abandoned the project. So Edna O'Brien is still one of my favorite writers, but her middle period, I don't know if she ever got better again. Her early stuff was just incredible, even right up until just a few novels before this, but these were experimental in a way that really bugged me, and the protagonists were all demonic and whiny. Female, too, if that makes a difference to you. It didn't to me. I would have had the same revulsion if they had been male, but no, we decided not to go any further with Edna. I will pick and choose some of her other books on my own in future years, but these 2 were awful. The biggest surprise is also one of my biggest appointments. Note to self, book an appointment with a speech pathologist as soon as possible. And that is Blackouts by Justin Torres, which I couldn't finish. I had specific kind of subjective reasons. I didn't like the font. There was way too many italics. I started out with the audiobook, which I hated, and it was one of my most anticipated books for this year. It won a big prize in the States, and lots of readers who were important to me and whose taste I often share, but not always, including Lindy, worshipped it, but I thought it was pretty awful. Favorite new author. So my criteria for a favorite author is I must read 2 books by that author and love them in a 5-star way. And that is how they ascend to that pantheon, that upper tier of my favorite writers. So in fact I have 2 answers for this as well. One is Thomas Grattan. His second novel, In Tongues, I loved with all my heart. And I also loved his debut, The Recent East. I have interviewed Thomas Grattan about his debut novel, The Recent East. That link will be in the show notes. And also, for publication day, a long-form chat about his second novel, In Tongues. And the other one is a gay Italian-Canadian novelist, Christopher DiRaddo. A year or 2 ago, I read his debut, The Geography of Pluto. I have a full review of this. It'll be in the show notes. And it took me 365 days to read his second novel, not just because it's a tome, it's not that much of a tome, 400 pages, but because I just had a lot going on in my life, and I kept reading it as slowly as possible, loved it also in a 5-star way. Stay tuned for a long-form chat between Christopher and myself, coming soon to a booktube channel near you. So those 2 gay male writers have ascended to the upper echelon of my literary esteem. More on those books, in fact, because the next topic is 8, Newest Fictional Crush. And that is one of the secondary characters in The Family Way by Christopher DiRaddo. The protagonist, Paul's lover, Michael. I adored him. He was about 30. Paul was almost 40 at the opening of the novel. And I just adored Michael. He was a bit of a endearing, not ne'er-do-well, but he just didn't have his shit together, and it was just endearing to watch him kind of screw things up and put things back together, and he just seemed sexy as all get out. I adored him. And number 9, new favorite character, and that is the protagonist of Thomas Grattan's In Tongues, Gordon, with the rather unsexy name Gordon, but he seemed like a sexy young guy. Landed in New York City to get out of Minnesota and start his life anew as a 20-something in around the year 2000. Lands in New York, creates a gay life. He had been leading an out gay life in Minnesota, but this was just a whole new... He finds and creates a gay life writ large in New York, as you do, and gets in all kinds of scrapes. He, too, was a lovable fuck-up, and the character arc was just phenomenal. So I found him endearing throughout, and by the end of the story, I'm not going to say anything about the ending, but holy smokes, what a powerful ending. I absolutely loved him. My favorite character so far this year. Number 10 is Book That Made You Cry, and I don't cry, ever. So let's just put that out there, and I know some of you are going to say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you cry? Well, you can try and make me cry and see if that makes you feel better, but no, I do not cry. But the one that got me the most verklempt this year was my top read fictionally of the year, My Friends by Hisham Matar. The trauma that happens to this kid, he's a Libyan student in the UK, and it's a tragedy that literally wounds him and his recovery from that in the early stages. It was so moving. He was so lonely, and he was cut off for political reasons, really, or for safety reasons, from reaching out to his family back in Libya, and it was just like, oh, it was really, really affecting. 11. Book That Made You Happy. Well, I have to say I have been really rebellious and kind of prickly about this prompt year after year, but last year I did read a book that made me happy, but before that I would always say, oh, for God's sakes, who reads to be happy? That's ridiculous, and I still kind of think that. But last year I had read a novel that was mostly comedic with a serious undertone, and I haven't read anything like that because I'm not drawn typically to that kind of writing, so I've got no answer. Are you happy? Number 12, favorite book to film adaptation you saw this year. I have not seen a film this year. Never mind an adaptation. What do you take me for? I read books. I'm a serious reader. I don't have time for movies. Number 13, favorite review you've done or favorite video. The video I love the most is my long-form interview with Elvin James Mensah, the author of one of the best novels I read last year, Small Joys. I'll link to it in the show notes. It was just one of the most affecting, kind of resonant, beautiful conversation I've ever had with an author. This book is slipping out of its dress. So yeah, and also there was a comedic thing in that 2 minutes before the video started, I was shaving and I cut my chin and it bled through the whole interview, so you don't even see my bleeding face, thank God. You just see Elvin James Mensah's pretty face, and he is more than a pretty face because this is an absolutely wonderful novel. Number 14, the most beautiful book you've bought for this year or received. And I think last year I didn't have anything. I'm not as swoony about a beautiful cover. Or let's put it a different way. I react to a beautiful cover, but I just do not buy books because they have beautiful covers. I've been burned many times doing that. But there is one book that I was curious about and bought that does have a beautiful cover. So there's an obvious choice this year. I think it was in last week's book haul, certainly quite recently, and that is The Coast Road by Alan Murrin. He's an Irish writer based in Berlin, and that is just a gorgeous cover. I love that cover so much. And the last question, I think, is kind of a confounding one, kind of a stupid question, I have to say. But maybe it applies to some people out there who do this tag, and that's great. But I've always kind of went, what? What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Well, none. I plan to read a whole bunch. Here are two that I both want to, and one in particular, for reasons that I will keep a secret, I intend to read by the end of the year. And that one is Cauvery Madhavan's newest novel, The Inheritance. This is her fourth novel. The Tainted was 2020, and this one comes out in mid-September. I'm really looking forward to reading it. A writer moves to a place in Ireland called Beara and quickly feels at home. He moves there from London, and then there is a historical tragedy that somehow ends up bleeding into the present and into his life. And that's all. I've had a very quick squint at the synopsis, but that's the gist I get from it, and I can't wait to read it. The other one that don't have any special reason to read it, other than he's one of my favorite writers. That's a special enough reason. The French gay writer Édouard Louis' latest novel to be translated, Change. And this is another one of his autofictional novels, all of which that I've read, I've loved. I'm dying to read this one, because this one, again, is very, very gay. So, that is my 2024 mid-year, not midlife, Sean, mid-year book freakout tag. Thanks for watching.